In 1984, a man by the name of John Edward Robinson established a few fraudulent companies. Robinson hired Paula Godfrey, who was 19 years old at the time, to work as a sales representative. Godfrey told friends and family that Robinson was sending her away for training. After hearing nothing further from her, Godfrey's parents filed a missing persons report. Police questioned Robinson, who denied any knowledge of her whereabouts. Several days later, her parents received a typewritten letter, with Godfrey's signature at the bottom, thanking Robinson for his help, asserting that she's okay. The investigation was terminated at that point, and since then, no trace of Godfrey has ever been found. In 1985, using the name John Osborne, he met Lisa Stacy and her 4-month-old daughter, Tiffany, at a women's shelter in Kansas City. He promised Stacy a job in Chicago, an apartment, and daycare for her baby, and asked her to sign several sheets of blank stationery. A few days later, Robinson contacted his brother and sister-in-law, who had been unable to adopt a baby, and informed them that he knew of a baby whose mother had committed suicide. For $5,500 and what he says were legal fees, Don and Helen Robinson received Tiffany and a set of authentic appearing adoption papers with the forged signatures of 2 lawyers and a judge. Stacy was never heard from again. In 1987, Catherine Clampett, who was 27 years old at the time, left her child with her parents in Wichita Falls, Texas, and moved to Kansas City to find employment. She was hired by Robinson, who reportedly promised her extensive travel and a new wardrobe. She vanished in June of that year. Her missing persons case remains open till this day. From 1987 to 1993, Robinson was incarcerated first in Kansas from 87 to 91 on multiple fraud convictions, and thereafter in Missouri for another fraud conviction and parole violations. At Western Missouri Correctional Facility, he met 49-year-old Beverly Bonner, the prison librarian, who upon his release left her husband, a prison doctor, after Robinson arranged for Bonner's alimony checks to be forwarded to a Kansas post office box. Her family never heard from her again. For several years, Bonner's mother continued forwarding her alimony checks and Robinson continued cashing them. By then, Robinson had discovered the internet and roamed social networking sites using the name Slave Master, looking for women who enjoyed playing a submissive partner role. An early online correspondent was Sheila Faith, who was 45 years old at the time, whose 15-year-old daughter, Debbie, was wheelchair-bound. Robinson, portraying himself as a wealthy businessman, offered to pay Debbie's medical expenses and give Sheila a job. And in 1994, the mother and daughter moved from Fullerton, California to Kansas City and immediately disappeared. Robinson cashed pension checks for the next 7 years. Robinson became more popular in the online chat rooms. In 1999, he offered a job and relationship to Isabella Lewicka, a 21-year-old Polish immigrant living in Indiana. When she moved to Kansas City, she signed over all her rights to Robinson, who took control of her life, bank accounts, everything. Sometime during the summer of 1999, she disappeared also. Around the time of Lewicka's disappearance, a licensed practitioner nurse named Suzette Truton moved from Michigan to Kansas with Robinson as his submissive slave. Truton's mother received several typed letters from her daughter. The letters were, as her mother said, uncharacteristically mistake-free. Later, Robinson told Truton's mother that she had run off with an acquaintance after stealing money from him. In 2000, he was arrested due to a woman that he knew telling the cops that he stole her sex toys. The police were already watching him, but the complaint gave them a reason to obtain a search warrant. During the search of his property, this photo was found. This is serial killer John Edward Robinson in a yellow sweater, holding baby Tiffany Stacy, whose mother he had murdered the day before. She's the baby that he gave to his brother, saying that she was adopted. His brother, along with Tiffany, didn't find out the truth for 15 years. During the rest of the searches of his rented garages and properties, 8 of his victims were identified inside of multiple 85-pound chemical drums. He's been on death row since the year 2000. There was a woman named Jackie who lived in a rented bungalow house with her 2-year-old son, Jamie, and her baby daughter, Samantha. About a month after moving in, she began hearing strange noises. It sounded as if there was something coming from the attic. She tried to ignore them, but every time she heard the unexplained noises, it sent a chill down her spine. So one night she noticed that the trap door that led to the attic was hanging open. She had never opened it and had no idea what was in that attic. She was too scared to go up to investigate, so she just closed the trap door again. She had the strangest feeling that she was not alone in this house. Jackie hired a 16-year-old girl named Tina to babysit her children. So one day, when they were in the kitchen, they noticed weird glowing lights floating around near the trap door in the ceiling. Jackie grabbed her camera and told the babysitter to take some pictures. As soon as Tina looked through the camera lens, she saw something that terrified her. She screamed in horror and dropped the camera, and both of them ran out of the house in fear of their lives. The babysitter said that what she had seen was a ghostly image of an old man with a face that looked like a skeleton. That's why she just never took the picture. She didn't have the courage to. So one day, she went out shopping. When she came home, she walked into the kitchen and found something creepy on the refrigerator. The magnetic letters of the alphabet on the fridge door had been rearranged to get the hell out. It unnerved her so much that she couldn't sleep that night, and she spent the night awake, watching over her children. In the middle of the night, she heard what sounded like loud breathing. She went down the hallway, looking for the source of the noise. When she opened the door to the spare bedroom, she recoiled in horror. What she saw was an old man sitting on her son's bed. Jackie was so terrified that she grabbed her kids and ran out of the house. But at this point, she couldn't afford to move out of the house, and she was worried that if she told anyone about what was going on, they would think that she was out of her mind. So the next day, she was in the kitchen, washing the dishes, and she noticed that her rubber gloves were covered in blood. But she didn't have any cuts on her hands. So anyways, that night, Jackie woke up in the middle of the night and felt someone holding her down. She couldn't get up and she couldn't breathe. She thought she was going to die, and then suddenly it let her go. She grabbed her kids and ran out of the house. That was the last straw. She couldn't take it anymore. She called in a team of paranormal investigators and asked them if they could find out what was going on in her house. The next evening, investigators arrived with their equipment. They set up cameras all over the house, and Jackie told them all about the supernatural events that she had experienced. All of a sudden, the lights went out. They suspected that whoever or whatever was hunting the house, it was angry that the investigators were there. When the lights came back on, one of the investigators decided to go up into the attic and take some pictures. He climbed up through the trap door, and the rest of the team waited for him to come back down. All of a sudden, they heard a scream coming from the attic. The investigator fell through the trap door and claimed that something had grabbed his camera. Just then, they heard the sound of someone walking around in the attic, even though there was nobody up there. Everyone just froze in fear and stared at the attic above them. After that, the investigators recovered their camera and they left. Two other investigators decided to go up in the attic with a flashlight and another camera. The rest of the team waited in the kitchen, and all of a sudden, they heard a loud snap, and the investigators in the attic started yelling and screaming. When they came back down, one of them was choking and gasping for air, and he had red marks around his throat. They said something had attacked him in the attic. When they looked at the pictures on the camera, they were horrified by what they found. In one picture, one of the investigators had an old rope around his neck. It looked like a noose, and it looked like he was being choked. Jackie and a team of investigators ran out of the house screaming, and this is the picture that was taken in the attic. After that, Jackie refused to spend another night in the house. She gathered her children and she moved out. Since then, the house has been rented by other people, but none of them has stayed very long. To this day, everyone involved in that case is still haunted by what happened in the attic. The scariest thing about this story is that it's true. It happened in San Pedro, California in 1989, and the woman's name is Jackie Hernandez. In 2006, Travis Alexander met 26-year-old Jodi Arias at a Las Vegas conference. Arias was a carefree, aspiring photographer, and Alexander was a salesman, motivational speaker, and devout Mormon. When the pair met, they had an instant connection. They started dating, and despite living in a different state, they continued their long-distance relationship. However, since the beginning, Travis's friends began noticing some red flags about Jodi and grew concerned about his safety. As the relationship between Alexander and Arius got more and more volatile and toxic, friends started to warn Travis. After 5 months of being together, Travis broke up with Jody. After a few weeks, she moved to Mesa where Travis lived. Jody began to show up at her ex-boyfriend's house unannounced and let herself in after unlocking a garage door. While Travis was angry at times by this intrusion, the couple would sometimes become intimate. Meanwhile, Travis had also began dating another woman by the name of Lisa. Jody would try to scare Lisa by knocking on her door and running away. After living in Mesa for about 8 months, Jody went to her family's home in California. In 2008, Travis had planned to attend a company retreat in Mexico with a Mormon woman he had started dating. He never went to the retreat, and his friend did not hear from him again. After 5 days of no contact, his friends visited his house and found a horrific scene. As it turned out, on June 4, 2008, Jody and Travis were at his house in Mesa. Jody stabbed Travis 27 times and shot him. The medical examiner also revealed that he had defensive wounds on his hands. He died at the age of 30. This is a photo that Jody took of Travis prior to killing him. His facial expression looks as if he's afraid. Travis was taking a shower at the time, and Jody abruptly pulled back the shower curtains and snapped the picture. Travis saw that she was armed, and at that point, he knew that he could not defend himself like he wanted to. Then she killed him. And since then, Jody has been sentenced to life in prison.